Hello, I'm Anthony. The question that's been occupying me for the past few weeks is the idea of quality control in songwriting. What I mean by this is when you're writing a piece of music, how do you determine what's good and what's bad and gets thrown away? And in fact, part of the question that I'm going to deal with today is whether or not we should be throwing away our musical ideas at all. Now, this whole question arose in the context of a piece of music that I'm writing at the moment. It's called Sunset, and it starts off very well. I love the way the song starts. In fact, I'll play it while I'm talking over the top. So I am very pleased with this as the beginning of a song. And the introduction of this arpeggio in the background is also still very tasteful, and I'm liking everything I hear. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, I started to layer more pieces of music on top. I came out with a melody idea. And as I would sit back and listen to this thing, it might be 4 minutes long in total, I went from the beginning of the song, which I always like. Every time I press play, I'm very happy with it. And at some point that I can't quite put my finger on, it falls off the rails, and I just don't like it anymore. And I found myself in this funk of indecision. There were 3 choices available to me, and I want to talk about each of those choices today. The first choice is to leave everything there and push on. I call this the shark approach. It's after a quote in Annie Hall by Woody Allen where he says, "A relationship's like a shark, it either constantly moves forward or it dies." The tagline to the joke is, what we're dealing with here is a dead shark. But in the context of a song, you can approach songwriting from that perspective as well. Constantly move forwards. Every idea that you lay down stays. And basically, once you've finished, then you've got this kind of outwelling, this outpouring of creative inspiration that if you give your subconscious free rein to write music, then you stand a very good chance of tapping something inside that your conscious mind might never approach. Now, while I've been thinking about that approach, it's occurred to me that I've never written a piece of music that way. I've never sat down and just thrown notes down, whether it be on the piano or the guitar, and kept the first take of everything. In fact, after I finish this video, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a few attempts at that. I'm going to try writing pieces of music where I just completely let my subconscious go and I stop worrying about harmonies or relationships between notes, any of the kind of technical static, I suppose, the noise that gets in the way of our creative process. I'm going to try as an experiment cutting all of that out and just doing something completely inspiration driven. But anyway, that's the first line of approach, this constantly moving forwards, just push forwards to the point where you've got a complete song. The second approach, the complete opposite of that, is if it's not good enough, throw it away. So I got to this stage with this song where I was just really unhappy with it. I'd listened to it so much and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, that in the end, I just thought, oh, sod this, I'm just going to throw the whole thing away and start again. The third option is going to live somewhere in between, and it's going to be the big grey area in between those two concepts. The pruning approach, where you keep the best parts of your song and you throw away anything that doesn't meet a specified bar of quality. It doesn't matter what that bar of quality is. That's actually a conversation I want to have at some point in the future. How high do you set that bar for everything that you write? But whatever that bar is, some parts of your song are going to reach it, some parts aren't. Prune away the bad parts, keep the good stuff, and undergo a process of iterative evolution where you're constantly trying to evolve the thing to improve it to get to the highest possible overall quality at the end of the process. So those are the 3 different kind of tacks that you can take. I'm going to think about each one of those in a little bit more detail. Let's take the shark approach first. What are the advantages of it? Well, very clearly, it's going to be very heavily inspiration driven. It's going to reveal the inner part of you far more than any other part of any other aspect of songwriting. Because when you close your eyes and you just let go, that's doing something. Your subconscious is better than your conscious in almost every conceivable respect, particularly when it comes to art. But generally speaking in life, if you trust your gut, then generally things work really well. Approaching songwriting from that perspective is a really interesting concept. It's kind of amazing to me that I've never considered writing an entire song with that like deliberate approach before. It's kind of odd to think so scientifically about a subconscious approach, but that's okay. I'm capable of just taking the restraining bolt off and saying, off you go, brain, let's see what happens. The other advantage of that approach, of course, is that you're going to finish everything you start. There's nothing better than getting to the end of a song and saying, there, I've done it. There, I've got lyrics and a drum beat and a bass line and guitars and keyboards. I've written a song, a complete song. There's an appeal to this scattershot approach to songwriting. Just get more stuff done, get more songs finished. There might be ideas out there that get trapped in the quicksand and never actually become a finished song because you spend too long worrying about the minutiae, whereas if you just pushed on and get to the end, then you never know, it might actually turn out to be awesome. On the flip side, though, you need to be aware of laziness and complacency, because if you approach songwriting from the perspective of, I'm going to finish everything I start, then you have to accept that some of those finished products are going to be bad. I can also imagine it's a disincentive to press the record button, because if you're kind of holding yourself to account and saying, I'm going to keep everything I record, you kind of need to make sure you're at least somewhere in the ballpark when you press record, and there might therefore be that disincentive to just press it quite so casually as I do at the moment. I can be in the middle of a jam session and just press record and think, whatever, I'll listen back to it later and figure out if there's anything good. If I've already decided that I'm going to be keeping what I record, then I'm likely to be more careful about pressing that record. So it might end up, ironically, actually resulting in less stuff getting recorded because of that kind of fear of recording rubbish. I don't know what that is as an acronym, but that's a real thing. I can imagine that being a serious problem. Now let's have a think about it from the exact opposite perspective. Throw away the thing entirely. This piece of music that I was unhappy with, let's say I just threw it in the bin and started from scratch. Well, that gives you the opportunity to start a new song. It's the most exciting part of the process, I find, when I've got a completely empty Cubase project. I can choose any synth that I want to play with, any drum sound. The world is my oyster. And when the first thing starts going down, lots of doors, opportunities start closing, and I'm kind of corralling myself down a particular thematic route. So having that initial buzz of excitement of starting a song, you're going to get that more often because you're throwing stuff away and you're starting again more often. That in itself, I don't think is a justification for the process, but it's going to be a side benefit. You're going to need to have a pretty thick skin though, because all of the emotional investment you've put into the piece of music up until that time has all been wasted. The biggest disadvantage of throwing away the everything, the scorched earth policy, is that you're going to have a lower overall output. Very few things are going to get through all of these quality gates. At some point down the line, you might just be having an off day, listen to it, you think, oh no, this has failed, this has not met the bar of constant quality that I'm applying to myself, I'm just going to bin it and start again. And I definitely fall into this trap. There are periods of time, months go by, where I don't complete any songs at all because everything that I start is just unsatisfactory, and I end up basically putting it on the shelf. I very rarely delete stuff. I'll put it on the shelf and think I'll come back to that later, but you really don't. It's very rare that I'll come back to an idea that I started 6 months ago and pick it up where I left off. So this is definitely something that has a negative impact on me. I abandon songs too often, I think. So of all of the approaches, of all of the different styles of songwriting, the scorched earth policy is the most dangerous to me because I find it's demoralizing to throw music away that you spent a lot of time on, and to not have any output at the end of the day is just too hard. The process of songwriting itself, it takes so long to get to the stage where this song, Sunset, that I'm writing, I've probably spent maybe 50 to 100 hours on it at this point, and I couldn't bear the idea of just throwing it away entirely. It's just too harsh. So somewhere in between those two lives the third concept, this pruning idea, where I've got the bass line, I've got the rhythm, I like those two things. I'll play a little bit of the guide vocal melody from this song. It's played on a piano, but this would ultimately be the vocals. Here's the melody. So I've spent weeks tinkering with these notes. And they're just starting to get to the stage where I really like them. 3 weeks ago, I hated the melody for this piece of music, and it was one of the reasons why I was going to throw it away. But by persevering and going back and deleting sections of it, maybe 2 or 3 bars at a time, throw it away and try to come up with a new one, I'm starting to get to the situation where there are little sections of that melody where I think that's really nice. And this idea of pruning and evolution is getting me to the point where all of the parts of the song with which I was unhappy are just slowly improving. Now, there are some pretty famous examples of the idea of evolving a song over a large period of time that have fairly outstanding results. My favourite album of all time is Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. The band toured that album for a year before it was released. You can listen to bootleg versions of the concerts from 1972, 12 months before the album was released, where entire sections of the album are simply missing. There's no On the Run, there's no Great Gig in the Sky, different lyrics, different melodies. It's a proto-album. They've got all of the various components and it's largely intact, but it's a very long way away from the magnificent piece of polished glory that the album ends up being. It's a work in progress. You can hear the alternate lyrics in the versions from 1972. They're not as good as the ones that end up on the album. He had that ability of self-analysis to say, that line isn't good enough. The vast majority of people, 99 people out of 100 might be saying, wow, I'm really pleased with that lyric, that's excellent. But he knew it wasn't good enough. He knew he could do better. And so that constant process of re-evaluation, where is your bar? How good does the piece of music need to be in order to get to that final mastering process, that final mixing and mastering process where it gets turned into a finished song? The downside of this approach, boredom. You're going to spend so long listening to this thing, just going round and round looping, not really knowing what's wrong, not knowing which notes to throw away, what lyrics to rewrite. It can be really frustrating. The song stagnates, as Sunset did with me a few weeks ago. Couldn't think of a single thing to do to improve it and knew it wasn't good enough. That's really frustrating. And in that situation, I approached a partial scorched earth approach where I deleted entire sections of the song. At one point, I deleted the whole melody and started rewriting it because I simply didn't know which notes to throw away. So I threw them all away. I knew it wasn't good enough. Do you get the idea? It's this constant process of really listening to what you're doing. Is it good enough? Yes, no. What am I going to do with that decision gate? There are definite advantages to keeping stuff and saying it's good enough, move on. It's good enough is a dangerous sentence because you can end up producing mediocrity, but it also means you're opening the possibility to actually getting the damn thing finished, and that's pretty important. And so at the moment, I'm pinning my colours pretty firmly on the pruning methodology. I think that's the best overall approach. Accept that it's going to lead to boredom and frustration sometimes, and be aware of that. And when it happens, be prepared to either push on, be the shark, or scorched earth, delete a load of stuff. But my primary heuristic is going to be pruning, resort to the others in the case of emergency. Hope you enjoyed this. Please hit like if you did. Alert YouTube to my presence. I'll see you again. Thanks very much.